Very good afternoon from Berlin. Good morning, good evening to all those who have joined from the different parts of the world. Uh, it's my honor and pleasure to welcome you to United Nations Science, Technology, Innovation Forum for Sustainable Development Goals Side Event 26 on Partnership for Global Degree towards affordable higher education and flexible student mobility. Welcome you all the distinguished speakers, participants. We have pleasure of having with us a great team of panelists. Internally, we have Professor Dr. Kyriakos, who has been a pioneer in promoting the global degree concept through his UN Chronicle article in 2020. Uh, Also, I am joined by my colleagues, head of the initiatives, Dr. Nilofer, and my colleague who is coordinating sustainability at Berlin School of Business and Innovation, Dr. Katrina. I welcome our distinguished guests, Ambassador Ramu Damodaran, founder, head of United Nations Academic Impact, and now permanent observer of UN Peace University at United Nations. Welcome, Professor Damodaran. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome Professor Sunita Narendran, who is Associate Pro Vice Chancellor, University of Roehampton, and she has been behind many sustainable education partnerships. Welcome, Professor Sunita.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
I welcome Professor Adewale Obadina, who is an expert of quality assurance and accreditation project director at Association of African Universities. And now he is working on linking quality assurance for quality of education and then linking it to Sustainable Development Goal 4. Welcome, Professor Obadina.
Thank you. Nice to be among the colleagues. Thank you.
And I welcome Mrs. Lily Bossen from UNESCO, who is heading the partnerships and many of the partnerships she is creating under the goal SDG 17 in the view of Sustainable Development Goal 17, which is affecting or impacting positively all the rest of the goals. Welcome, Lily, joining us this afternoon in Berlin. I welcome all the distinguished participants who have joined, our representatives from Confederation of Indian Private Universities, where I also chair committee on sustainability. And I welcome all the distinguished vice chancellors, presidents who have joined through YouTube or through Zoom channel. Now, not taking much of the time, it's my pleasure to invite Professor Dr. Kyriakos, who is Provost of Berlin School of Business and Innovation, Chief Academic Officer of Global University System Germany, which has a group of 3 universities and other sister institutions. Professor Kyriakos, over to you.
Thank you so much, Siv, and dear colleagues from all over the world. It's a pleasure to host this event in our premises in BSBI today, and I hope that this serves also as a platform to generate future discussion of these major issues that we are going to tackle today. If we will go back to the last, let's say, 6 to 12 months in relation to developments in higher education globally, we observe 3 main domains, which is food for thought for me. The one is what the post-COVID situation has generated globally, and all the new norms that it has created, and also how we are using the online studies or distance studies or blended learning and hybrid modes and all these different types. That's the one thing, the one pillar. Then it's what the current student and academic community wants globally, which is what we call flexibility in student mobility. This is a very hot topic in higher education globally currently. And the last thing that everybody talks about is the application of AI. So I think that all our aims and efforts toward redesigning curricula, discussing about the application of norms, and provide new opportunities for our students and academic community to integrate they should be under these three pillars, these three big domains. I think the time has come to seriously discuss on a global level of what we call the establishment of a global curriculum in most of the scientific domains around the world. And this brings us to the next stage, which is actually the application of probably a global credit, like the UK credits, the US credits, or the ECTS that we use in Europe. So we should use a new international academic credit as a currency of higher education, as it has been with the application of Europe in the European Union and the Economic and Monetary Union. And that can bring new alliances of institutions, of countries, all together to start discussing how they can evolve from that stage onwards. I want you to imagine that education now is moving like we're building curricula, like what we did with Lego bricks. So imagine that you have an engineer, a civil engineer, that graduated 10 or 15 years ago. And as you know, probably 20 or 25% of this curriculum is the same as for civil architects in architecture. So why not having this person back to the institution, complete a certain number of modules and credits, and then get an architecture degree as well? So this can be an option. Another option is to start retraining all the professionals that their professions, like architecture again, I will use the same example. 15 years ago, nobody used AutoCAD. So most of their skills, they were to design via hand in drawings and things, but now we have this software. So we need to retrain these people. Same as happened in medicine with robotic surgery. So we started with conventional surgeries, then we went to laparoscopic surgery, now we have robotic surgery. So this retraining scheme all over the world in most of the programs is also something that we need to tackle on a global scale now, because we are a big educational village. And the fact that we are so many of us participating from different areas in the world is actually proving that. At the top, there should be the targets of the United Nations. I'm referring to SDGs and the application until 2030. I think the time has come to start discussing the next level. What is going to happen for this target after 2030? Maybe we need a new set. Maybe education is the key for other areas as well. So I think we should open a forum on this and build on that with all the knowledge we have, because above all, and I think you also share this opinion, education is a commodity. And education, time, and talent are three domains that we should focus and work all of us together. So I will stop because I can talk for hours on this.
Thank you for this opening remark, and particularly highlighting the need to go beyond SDGs post 2030, and also particularly highlighting the dimension of quality, flexibility, and a linked dimension of cost. Because when we are talking of standardization of credit, and you very interestingly mentioned about dual currency or dual credit system, which many of the countries, even in European Union, when they are transitioning towards, because there are internal resistance and implementation issues. So this type of arrangement could also be something in future, and given the artificial intelligence role of AI, if it could be applied to have one is international credit, another is equivalent local credit, and then how it equates and something like that. So thank you for this. Now I invite Mr. Ramu Damodaran, who has been founder head of United Nations Academic Impact, and as I mentioned, currently permanent observer of UN Peace University at United Nations.
Thank you so much, Shivji, and thank you, friends. Professor Kouveliotis was very specific and kind in referring to the Sustainable Development Goals, which of course leap to us when we consider this question. And for me, as someone from India like you, Professor Tripathi, or our friends from the Confederation of Indian Private Universities, what really leaps out is one particular goal, 4.7. Those two digits, 4 and 7, for us always represent the year of India's independence, and so have a special poignance and meaning. But in the context of the SDGs, These are remarkable because for the first time, 193 countries were able to get together and assert the ideal and quality of global citizenship, which is really what this conversation is about. But beyond the fact of our country's independence in 1947, I also want to refer to, and Dr. Bolson will probably recall this, the very first UNESCO conference held after the Charter of the United Nations was in 1947 in the state of New York at Adelphi University on the idea of a world society. So we've been able to think about this in various forms in the past: global citizenship, a world society, and of course, within the Charter of the United Nations, whose 80th anniversary we celebrate this year, that very telling phrase, the dignity and worth of the human person. And that ideal of a human person, not a person who is defined by her nationality or her religion or her profession, is something which has now emerged into the conversation we're having today. And it's particularly moving that we're having this conversation anchored in the city of Berlin, which was once a war-torn capital of a fragmented country and is now the proud capital of a united nation in Europe. When I look at the distinguished panelists who have joined me today, I see how all of your research work has really contributed to this ideal. Professor Tripathi, you have spoken about ethics and transparency in higher education. And what greater transparency can there be than in a recognition that is universal of the degree or qualifications that we attain? Professor Sunita Narendran has used a wonderful metaphor about a learning journey, not only the quest of our individual journeys to learning, but in the very practical, real, literal sense of the term, during the period of COVID, when the journey was not physical, but was really technological and to an extent intellectual. Dr. Lily Boson has spoken of South-South cooperation, again, another arena in which we can bring in the ideal of a global university, one continent, one set of countries at a time. And Professor Obadina had a wonderful metaphor about fermented foods in tropical areas. Now, what are fermented foods? They are, in a sense, what Professor Kouveliotis just referred to as blended foods, like blended learning. You can take something, you can ferment it, extending its shelf life, transforming its health and other properties, and thereby really creating something from what you have, which is not necessarily new, but improved. So I look at this diversity of metaphors and experiences that we share in our discussion today, and I begin to wonder, why are we resistant? The continent of Europe, as Dr. Kouveliotis has amply proved, did it years ago when it spoke about integration, when it talked about the Bologna process, when it talked about the fact that learning does not need to be nationally compartmentalized, that learning is really, as SDG 4.7 reminds us, is something which is a universal human right, yes, but more important, a universal necessity. And any necessity must be allowed to flourish without limitations being put on it of national border, of belief, or of other barriers. And particularly at a time when physical distances have shrunk, when you do not need to be physically present at a university or a center of learning to acquire its skills and its degree, what excuse have we not to go international? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramuji. It is you highlighted about the need of South-South cooperation, and also you highlighted integrating how there could be, we need to revisit and redefine about the world society and what role education can play. And I think one of the practical measures to this is that first we should be moving towards a uniform, if not ideally uniform, at least something harmonized credit structure. So thank you so much for your remarks. Now it's my pleasure and honor to invite Professor Sunita Narendranji. Please.
Um, Good afternoon, everybody from UK. It's morning in other places. Thank you very much for providing the context for the need for a universally accepted credit structure that will enable students to have a learning journey that is both knowledge gaining, which is very important, and also to be able to participate in a more accessible education model across the world. I'd also like to say a very big thank you to Professor Damodaran for looking at my work and for highlighting the value that I place on the learning journey of individuals, because education is not just a means to an end. It is something that is empowering people to participate in a more educated way, in a more informed way, in the way the world is evolving and changing. And as Professor Kovlatis said, that there are three very major drivers to this. One is the change in context post-COVID, the need for more flexible education, and also the fact that we are seeing rapid changes in the way people learn through AI models and through advances in technology. So when we talk about this panel discussion, for me, is to talk about a universality in the credit structure. Learning as an educator and somebody who's been in education for over 30 years, I think learning outcomes are very important. Education is all about being able to acquire learning outcomes at a particular level, which includes knowledge, which we call as knowledge, skills, and behaviors. These are very, very important as an educator. And for me, education is all about being responsible, as we hold a great privilege as educators because we provide that knowledge, skills, and behaviors. And so it is a serious business, if you want to use the word business in the language of education, which I don't really subscribe to, but I will, for want of a better terminology, I will use. So when we talk about credit structures, if we have a credit structure that is universally transferable, then that makes education more accessible. And in my conversation with Dr. Tripathi and Professor Tripathi, we talked about the need for accessibility in education, which is very fundamental to the SDG 4. And I think one of the ways in which we can make education accessible is to make it more cost effective, which means we should be able to, forgive me for using two terminologies here, APCL and APEL. Accreditation of prior certificated learning and accreditation of prior experiential learning. This needs to happen without a student having to move from one country to another and experience huge amounts of expenses in the process of doing so. And it also enables universities across the world. And as somebody who has lived in different parts of the world and contributed to education in those different parts of the world, I think it's very important that that universities and higher education institutions are able to collaborate effectively. And I think when we have a credit structure that is easy to understand, easy to apply, that makes it possible. And then it also provides a clear understanding of equivalence to stakeholders, because the students are stakeholders, we as educators are stakeholders, and there are employers who are also stakeholders. And when you have confusing credit structures, confusing understanding of credits, it makes employers very difficult to kind of see where is this credit equivalence of somebody who claims to have a master's or a first degree in a particular subject. And so therefore it benefits graduates in global markets. And I think that I don't sort of separate employability, employment, and education. I think these are all interlinked, and we have to be, as responsible educators, make sure that the kind of education that we provide also provides for people who have benefited from that education to be able to contribute successfully to society. Now, just to kind of go back and rehearse what we've already been discussing is that one, when we use different credit frameworks, it can be very confusing. And that is a challenge. There are also quality assurance concerns in when we adopt a particular credit equivalence. One of the big concerns for quality assurance is whether these credit equivalences reflect comparable academic rigor across the institutions and learning outcomes. And I have often encountered questions such as this that I face with the regulatory bodies when they want to sort of give, if somebody has studied in different parts of the world, how do we accredit this? Have they met the learning requirements we have as a regulatory body? So all these questions start to pop up. And then these national education policies that many countries are adopting, they may also limit credit recognition. And I think we do have countries across the world who are working, but I still see regional networks. So we see ECTS, which is European. We see NACE, which is American. Then we see the emerging standards such as the ASEAN Credit Framework, ACTS, which is regional again. And then we have the South Asia, which is Asian Academic Credits, which is AACS, which is building, they're working towards using the ECTS. So you see, it's again still very regional. We don't really yet have something that is more global and which is acceptable across the world. So I leave you with thoughts on this, and I welcome discussion and your comments on what I've just shared.
Thank you very much, Professor Sunita, and particularly highlighting that education is not only means to an end, but rather what we see means to a means which has no end. And then linking it to the learning outcome, to the credit and the rigor, that whether this rigor is reflected in the respective context, that's yes. And it reminds me that when you mentioned about the different regional credit systems, ECTS or AAC or any other, a very recent experiment in India has been for last 2 years as a part of new national education policy there, what they call academic bank of credits, where students studying across any of the institution or university, they keep on storing in a central repository, and they can move seamless transfer from one place to another place using like a bank account, that what they are accumulating. But that is also at too far an end, and sometimes there are various issues, questions. So thank you for this, and we will come back to you with some of the questions. Now I invite Professor Adewale Obadina, who is Quality Assurance and Accreditation Director at Association of African Business Schools, and brings a lot of rich experience from African continent. Professor Obadina, please.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon from Accra, Ghana. I'm talking from the Association of African Universities, Secretariat Accra in Ghana. I want to appreciate the organizer for giving AAU a platform to join the esteemed discussant for this session. Let me say, to put in context, that diverse academic systems across the globe pose challenges to student mobility and recognition of learning. And the central question here is that, what actionable measures can we take to achieve credit standardization? I want to say, by joining other colleagues that have started the discussion, that there's need to develop a global credit transfer framework. This will help to support adoption of global credit transfer system, similar to what is happening in Europe. It has been mentioned, the ECTS, European Credit Transfer System, Presently, Africa as a continent do not have a credit transfer framework, but we've started at Association of African University leading a project on how to make sure that we have what we call African Credit Transfer System, ACTS, which will help to define clear guidelines on credit value, learning outcomes, and student workload. As I said, this is a project that is funded by European Union, and the project is called Harmonization, Quality Assurance, and Accreditation in Africa. And AAU is leading this harmonization discussion through regional consultation and technical working groups. Still on the issue of what actionable measures can we take to achieve credit standardization? I also want to say that there is need to align curriculum structure and learning outcomes if we want to have what we call global credit transfer framework. And this can be through promoting outcome-based education and credit definition based on notational learning hours. Also by encouraging institutions to review and revive their programs using regional and possibly a universal benchmark. The alignment will support comparability and mutual recognition of credit across institutions if it's going to happen globally. Also to say that there's need to build national where it's not existing, regional where it's not existing, and what we are discussing, a global quality assurance alignment. And this can be done through a credit standardization, which must be embedded in all these phases, national, regional, and possibly globally qualification frameworks. So there's need to encourage harmonization of this quality framework within all these different phases. And in doing this, it means that the quality assurance agencies and ministries of education could be encouraged in different countries to ensure alignment and oversight. I also want to say that for us to achieve this, there's need to promote what I call institutional and intergovernmental cooperation. Institutional and intergovernmental cooperation should be promoted. And in doing this, this will encourage memoranda of understanding between institutions for mutual credit recognition, because we are talking about what achievable measure can be put in place to achieve standardization of credit. So there's need to create credit transfer policies within and across regional and global universities. Association of African University is positioned to serve as a conveyor for multi-stakeholder platforms and pilot initiatives in this regard. It has been mentioned, the application or introduction of technology, AI, into the educational system. There's need to leverage on digital tools and transcripts. So there's need to support the implementation of digital student records. This is not common in Africa. And interoperable credit transcripts formats, so that there will be a platform, general, universal platform, to be able to access the transcript for the student. This will build trust in credit data and support faster student transition. In conclusion, I will say that credit standardization is achievable through structured collaboration, policy alignment, and digital innovation. And to say that AAU remains committed to facilitating dialogue technical assistance, and capacity building across the continent and the globe. Together, we can make student mobility a reality globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Obadina, and really the point that you highlighted, particularly that both should go together, that regional credit development and global credit development system. And you highlighted about the need for the use of technology, how we can achieve this conversion. And it's very good to know that Association of African Universities is currently working on creating the regional standards. And I think that this experimentation of linking it with the global credit system, the dual model that we are talking today, can start from Africa. And this we will be taking it forward. Thank you so much. And now to facilitate this, we need international agencies and bodies which are facilitating this. And for this, it's my pleasure and honor to invite Mrs. Lily Bossen, who is heading the partnership and sustainability collaboration for larger impact of education. Mrs. Lily Bossen, over to you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I would like to begin by thanking Berlin School of Business and Innovation in association with the Confederation of Indian Private University and Blitz, India. It's truly an honor to be here among all the experts who have already spoken and addressed, in a way, a lot of very emerging issues in the space of global degree, considering the very rapid changes, for example, digital transformation. And I mean, I think it's important that we highlight the number of students that we're looking at. I mean, if we look at the total enrollment of higher education student with the university, we're looking at pretty much 254 million. However, within this number, only 66.4 million are currently studying abroad. And this is already a significant increase from just 2 million back in 2000. But if we just look at the number, it's basically saying that we're only looking at 2.6% of the total global higher education enrollment of students who have this very direct needs of having, in a way, the standardization of credits and academic programs so that they will be able to study anywhere and get their transfer back. But is it true that we're only talking about the 2.6%? Or if we look at it from another side of students who actually do not have the capacity, in a way, to study on site and would need to purely rely on this virtual modality of learning when it comes to higher education. And I mean, I know some of our experts have already talked about the impact of AI and digital transformation, but let's, if we can go back maybe 5 years before now, if we look at the pandemic and how it has really acted as a catalyst for rethinking traditional, ways of studying at higher education level. In a way, we can say that virtual student mobility or virtual learning has already addressed and also called for a critical need for standardization of credits and academic programs. And this is directly linked to how degrees are currently being shaped and should be shaped in the future. And in a report that UNESCO International Institute of Higher Education, UNESCO ESOG, that we published back in 2022 called Moving Minds, it examined how virtual student mobility can actually democratize access to international higher education. And those findings highlight how virtual student mobility eliminates many traditional barriers, particularly for students from disadvantaged backgrounds or those with family or work responsibilities. It is also considered a very cost-effective way of learning comparing with physical mobility while offering valuable cross-cultural exchange opportunities. It is also highlighted that virtual student mobility can also leverage information and communication technology to enable academic, cultural, and experiential exchanges across borders and institutes. And it really provides this flexibility and, in a way, this very flexible alternative that can make international higher education more inclusive and sustainable. And with that said, UNESCO have been working on conventions for decades. We started with regional conventions for higher education that are specifically for degree transfer. And then in 2019, we have launched this global convention on higher education recognition, representing this very first global UN treaty specifically addressing higher education qualifications. And with this convention, it basically sets out this universal principles for transparent and non-discriminatory recognition of qualifications, including those from non-traditional learning modes, such as remote study or such as virtual mobility that we just talked about. And this convention plays a very crucial role in facilitating the recognition of academic credentials across borders, which is essential to enable the movement of students between countries and institutions. And I mean, in a way, the Global Convention is the first one that covers all 5 UNESCO regions. But at the same time, we also have those regional conventions. For example, we have one in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the Secretariat is currently based at UNESCO ISAC. And what we have done is that back, let's say, starting from February 2023, the Convention Committee for LAC has launched 2 key publications, one for recognizing Venezuelan academic qualification and another one on the feasibility of implementing the diploma supplement in the LAC region. And such recognition of Venezuelan degree is particularly important for migrants and refugees because it helps them to access educational opportunities and labor markets abroad while still considering the convenience of what the region can offer when it comes to the cultural similarity, as well as the consistent language that can be supported. And this approach really supports, in a way, with recognitions of a similar context for other displaced populations, ensuring that their qualifications are acknowledged in the host country, which is crucial for their integration and also economic mobility into the labor market. So to move towards a standardized academic credits and mobility program across different contexts, there are some essential steps as indicated in UNESCO studies and conventions. First, a transparent and non-discriminatory recognition of qualification. 2, mutual recognition of qualifications across countries. 3, recognition of diverse learning modes, including virtual mobility. 4, clear criteria for recognition procedures. 5, regional and global cooperation for this harmonized recognition practices. It's very important to highlight that the development of partnership for global degrees and innovation in student mobility are essential for advancing higher education. And such partnership can facilitate with the integration of both virtual and physical mobility and investing in technological infrastructure, as well as the standardization process for credit recognition. And I mean, as much as we're here to expand access for quality higher education for more students, regardless of their location or background, it is a joint effort that need to have this collective action among different stakeholders within higher education in order to truly create a more flexible and inclusive pathway to higher education. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lily, for sharing the different initiatives of UNESCO and also emphasizing on the need and giving some of the examples that how across the different context, international context, there is a need for global credit transfer and standardization. And particularly when you mentioned about the use of hybrid learning, virtual learning, then it comes to like there are 3 issues which basically pop up when we call it. One is partial mobility, another is full mobility. And partial mobility, as we see, many countries, many institutions develop 2+2 program, like students is in one country for 2 years, then moves to another country for 1 year or 2 years. But when it is full mobility, then also there are some issues. And now with the advent of technology, there could be issues like how we combine virtual with conventional. Like, can it be possible like a student does a part of degree through virtual and then remaining that because that helps in minimizing the cost. It helps in adding to the flexibility. The same thing comes along with when it comes to integration of vocational and technical education. Someone has done a professional diploma or at level 4 or level 5 and then want to come back to conventional education, then how we are going to harmonize this. So I think that this also sets an opportunity for us that when we are working on global credit mobility and transfer, that how we align these areas which can also offer new opportunities for the students, and they can have more and more international options at affordable cost. Because now the statistics Lily mentioned about that, what is the percentage and millions of students who are crossing the border, it has a lot of cost impact. Thank you so much for all your contributions. And now I come to some questions for starting our discussion. To start with, I come back to Sunita. Professor Sunita, you have been involved in shaping number of collaborations, number of partnerships. And do you have any specific observations regarding the credit transfer, particularly in terms of advantages or challenges or some experiences that you have come across in practice? So anything if you'd like to share.
Thank you very much. I mean, this has been really a very fantastic introduction. We talked about what we need to aspire for, but I'd like to start from where we are at the moment. Where we are at the moment is that we have credit systems that are very, very different. And when we talk collaborations and partnerships, we have, as many of us who are working in collaborative partnership areas will realize that it's an absolute nightmare sometimes to map these credits, because first of all, there are different levels. You have structures that are bound by the number of credits. So each module or each course has got X number of credits. Then when they're transferring over, or when there is a collaboration with another institution, those numbers of credits are different. So coming back to this question of learning outcomes, sometimes credits are measured in the number of hours of learning. Sometimes credits are measured in terms of what has been achieved in terms of learning outcomes and the level of learning outcomes. And this presents a big challenge because how do we map it? How do we recognize it? How do we satisfy the regulatory bodies who work along with many of us, or many of the courses? How do they appreciate these credit transfer process? So it is a big challenge. And I think how do we overcome this? Because if we don't overcome this, it's very, very difficult for us to make education more accessible. And it's very difficult for us to continue those collaborations and offer education, and also to demonstrate equivalence to the stakeholders who are interested in giving these students jobs at the end of it. So these are some of the challenges. But we overcome these challenges through what we call as mapping mechanisms, where we need to map the credit structure that is being shown to us, and to see how that we can incorporate that into our existing credit structure, so that we can enable the student to be given prior recognition for the work that they have done. And it's not very easy to do this mapping. And when I was the Dean of the Faculty of Business and Law until quite recently, every time I talked about mapping, my deputy deans will shudder, and they'll start looking at me wondering whether can we change this topic? Can we do something else? It is not easy to do this mapping. So I greatly welcome some kind of a unified umbrella or structure that we can use in order to be able to, to provide that recognition. And then to just touch on Lily's point about virtual learning and virtual education, there is still a big divide, and including countries. Some countries do not take virtual education, give it the same equivalence as face-to-face learning. And that is something that we have to overcome. I'm not going to name any country, but recently there was a lack of recognition for online programs in one particular country. So there are those kind of divides as well. And whenever we talk about online education, the question that pops up is retention. Students who engage in online education, we are not able to retain them. They don't sometimes complete. And it is also difficult to demonstrate equivalence. So we've got to kind of cross the divide, where virtual education is given the same level of importance as to face-to-face education, sitting in a classroom and learning. So that is an elephant in the room that we cannot ignore. We do need to kind of. So On this very pessimistic note, I'm going to hand over to somebody who can talk more positively and optimistically. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Sunita, and you highlighted particularly the role of regulatory bodies, and also you mentioned about that for some countries which do not recognize equally the online, or I have seen that I come across recently regulations in some countries which says that online degrees of foreign countries are not recognized. Now that creates a question that if other countries start responding in the same way, then it would be tariff war on degrees. So now, thank you for this contribution, and I will coming back to Professor Obadina. How do you see the role of university associations and other similar platforms where many universities or institutions collaborate and participate in harmonizing this credit structure?
Yeah, thank you very much. Credit harmonization, as we are looking at it, is a key enabler of student mobility, academic collaboration, and quality assurance. Therefore, university associations have a unique leadership role in driving this harmonization, either internally and across the regions or globally. Now, in looking at the role of this association within their own university network, I would say that university associations like our own AAU can set common academic benchmarks and frameworks. Also, they provide technical guidelines on credit values, workload definitions, and learning outcomes. Through capacity building workshops, curriculum audits, and peer reviews, the university associations can help their member university to align with credit systems. Let me say that AAU supports the African Credit Transfer System, which is also an example. I've mentioned that earlier. We are talking about the role of this university association also in inter-network collaborations. University associations also can facilitate cross-regional and cross-national and globally cooperation. In Africa, for example, we have different sub-regions within the continent. We have higher education institutions that are from the Francophone speaking countries. We have the University Association from Central African countries. We also have this University Association from South African region, and we have some also from the Western African region. All this also comes together working with the Association of African Universities, the AAU. Still about their role in inter-network collaborations, they also can create platforms for dialogue, joint policy development, and pilot mobility projects within the continent or globally. These pilot projects about mobility can be created. Example of this, as I mentioned earlier, is a project under Aqua Initiative that come up with the development of what we call African standards and guidelines for quality assurance, which also include aspects related to credit comparability. So this is what the University Association can also do within their inter-network collaboration. This collaboration can pave the way for either continental framework that can support the continental qualification framework or global framework that can also support what we can call global qualification framework. In all this, there will be key challenges, or there will be challenges. But one major challenge that we'll be looking at is inconsistent academic calendars. and course structures across universities. Let me cite an example here in the context of the African continent. A West African university on a semester system might struggle to align credits with a North African partner using a trimester system. So this is what is possible as a challenge. And this can lead to difficulties in credit recognition and transfer. Excuse me, once there's a challenge in the calendar, and this can delay or discourage student mobility. University associations can address this through consensus building, facilitating bilateral and multilateral curriculum alignment. In conclusion to this, I will say that university associations are catalysts for harmonization. They can convene, standardize, support, and monitor the system that we're talking about. Credit harmonization must be a collaborative, inclusive, and adaptive process, especially in a diverse continent, I would say Africa. Association of African University is committed to advancing this framework that we're talking about and partnerships that will enable a unified global higher education space. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Obadina, and particularly highlighting the role of university associations and Association of African Universities. And very interestingly, you mentioned something about the academic calendar, and this is also one of the issues, and that's where there is a need for more and more modular approach towards education, where irrespective of the calendar that we follow, the modules can fit. And this is also one of the areas to be looked into. And thank you for the highlighting this, and definitely we will take it forward. Now I come back to Professor Kyriakos, to you, because your 2020 UN Chronicle article on global degree gives some very interesting insights. How do you see the future of standardization of different credit systems? What are your views on that?
Thank you, Shiv. I think we all agree that we share some common values in regards to how education is moving and how possible it is to establish a global degree in the near future. But we need to start from a certain point. And if the pandemic taught us something, is that time, location, language, even the educational modes of offering should not be considered as barriers anymore. So we need to build on this legacy. And that brings to another concept which is associated with the SDGs, of course, but that creates academic freedom as well. So the possibility to study something and offer types and modes of study, that location is not important, the time that you attend something is not important, not even the language, or if it is online, hybrid, blended, whatever this norm is. We need to start from a point that we should not try to replace any existing system or substitute any degree with a global degree or something like this. This should not be the aim, and that will bring us in a confrontation with potential institutions or even countries. But what we should do is to create and start from a soft base of a parallel system. For example, you mentioned this publication that I was very honored that the United Nations Chronicle published my work on a global degree, and that led also to the creation of my foundation for the establishment of a global degree in The Hague as a not-for-profit organization. And we can have something like a consensus or even an educational treaty, work with the Confederation of Indian Private Universities, with UNESCO, with other colleagues and institutions as well, an organization, to establish something like a global consensus / a treaty, and adopt something like a global degree badge. And there the establishment of a global curriculum, as I mentioned, is very, very important. And at this stage, the AI, which was perceived, although unregulated so far, and still is a phenomenon under development, but still it should be perceived and conceived as an ally and as an instrument to help us to conduct, for example, even on experimental basis, automation in mapping. And that can save hundreds of hours of work. And why not start with the basic degrees that most of the countries and institutions are offering, like a business course, and try to establish a global curriculum? We should not start with regulated professions and degrees that are under regulatory bodies and professional associations like medicine or nursing or engineering. But if we share the same set of learning outcomes towards the establishment of a global curriculum for basic degrees, then it's a starting point. And then those institutions that they are sharing this rationale and that can join us in this effort, that can also award something like a global degree badge on the side, like another form of a diploma supplement, let's say, this is also a good starting point. It is for sure that in the next 5 years, 10 years, this revolution in education will happen anyway. So what I suggested 5 years ago with the establishment of a global degree, I think now we're more mature to try and implement some of the time frame that I have designed. And I think time frame is important. Further collaboration and potentially starting with us, the establishment of a working group towards achieving such a goal can also be fruitful. And again, we should keep this framework open for suggestion, like an open brainstorming among us. And we are also very lucky because we all love education. And we can leave our mark behind and we can establish also something for the next generation. And I'm not saying this like in big words or using like abstract visions. Or these are things that we can actually do and we can start from today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And this is very interesting to highlight. You highlighted about the global badge. And it links to what Professor Obadina mentioned in the beginning, the dual system. And this is very important. We feel that instead of replacing something, to start with the consensus building. And in that process, when people see the benefit and given that what Professor Sunita mentioned earlier, that mapping, and when we do the mapping, quantitative and qualitative, thousands and thousands of hours, and sometimes no agreement and many arguments. So, but with the technology, all these things can be minimized and a very good system can be developed. And the idea of establishing a working group, definitely we will put it in our recommendation when we are submitting to the United Nations. And we will see how we take it forward. Thank you so much for your contribution. Lily, I come back to you because now from Regional University Association, we are coming to UNESCO. And Professor Kariakos already added one solution in that how we can work. How do you see that role of international agencies in facilitating this harmonization or standardization of credits? Any specific interventions you would like to suggest, any measure, which based on your experience, you mentioned 2019 convention and some other reports. So any specific things?
Thank you so much. Well, I mean, to start, I'm gonna take Sunita's challenge in bringing hope into the conversation to have a more positive vibe in this whole space of degree recognition. The hope is in us, all of us together. The key is how we work together, how we collaborate, and how we partner to make this happen. And if I may go back and repeat the importance of the Global Convention on Higher Education Recognition and the regional conventions on the recognitions of studies, diploma, and degree in higher education. it's the fragmentation of credit system really creates barriers for student mobility and credit transfer, and it's really a limit, in terms of access to further education and opportunities, which further lead to access to jobs and transitions in between institutions, countries, and among different labor markets. And this is why those conventions matter on multiple levels and impacting everyone in higher education system and their connection to other sectors. So promoting the signing, the ratification, and the applications of those conventions in a way promotes a more connected global education system. And since Global Convention has become active in March 2023, 38 countries have joined. But if we look at the overall number of our member states of UNESCO, that's a very minimal number, because we have nearly 200 countries as member states, and we only have 38 that have joined this global convention. And this shows that we need increasing commitment to improve international higher education mobility. We understand that in different countries, there may be the conversation of public versus private and how we want to commercialize or publicize higher education. The conversation will always be there, of course, but it's on us on what we want to do to encourage those further signatories and ensuring that proper implementation will help eliminate barriers for students and to further facilitate with this global recognition of qualifications so that our core, which are the students, can truly benefit from other partners' dedication in finding a middle ground of their interests. And the success of those conventions rely heavily on the active involvement of higher education institutions. As much as we can try to, convince the different QA agencies, the different private sector, the employers on their, perspectives and recognition of the degrees, the greatest responsibility is within the universities, within the higher education institutions. We play a central role in applying those principles set forth and set out by the conventions, particularly through the partnership that enable the alignment of credit structures with the global standard. And by forming strategic collaborations, institutions can ensure that their credit systems are consistent with the international frameworks, share best practices, and enhance opportunities for students. And everyone has a role to play in it. What would professors do, when they design their curriculum? What can they twist just a little bit to help students to be closer to the framework that other countries will get to? What can researchers do, right? In aligning the different strategies, transferring knowledge from the teaching and learning portal to what the industries can work, and what would the managers do, what would administrative staff do at higher education institutions if they could take one step further on understanding what is needed to move the institution's interests to serve greater interests of the student, to align them with the global standard. A lot of things will take place. And if I may, I like to mention another key initiative that can demonstrate the power of academic partnership, which is the South-South University Cooperation Network that have been co-launched by UNESCO ESOC and the UN Office of South-South Cooperation. The South-South University Cooperation Network has really been promoting this collaboration among South-based universities, addressing this historical imbalance where students in the South have primarily only been focusing on mobility to the North. And this South-South University Cooperation Network have been encouraging universities in the South to develop academic collaboration that can provide more equitable opportunities for students, that can address the need of young researchers and help to reduce the dependence in a way of the only, North-South model, but open up to South-South cooperation as well as triangular cooperation to support with the fostering of cross-regional cooperation. And the South-South University Cooperation Network's initiative also bring together students and faculty from different universities across the Global South to develop solutions for challenges and priorities related to SDGs. And some of those development of solutions started with some sort of initiative or program on top of their degree requirement, but is currently now actually moving towards having a consistent, for example, course on SDG to be integrated within the formal education system. And those are kind of the examples and initiatives that emphasize youth leadership and interdisciplinary collaboration and empower students to become more of those agents of change within their communities and play a crucial role in encouraging further mobility, knowledge exchange, and regional cooperation in the South, and to contribute to a more balanced global education system, especially if we talk about degree recognition. So in conclusion, the global and regional convention provide a very solid foundation for standardizing academic credits and improving student mobility. However, the success of those efforts rely on the collaboration of all education stakeholders, and the institutions supported by governments, international organizations, and the private sector need to align the credit system with the global standard and ensure universal recognition of those qualifications. And at the same time, while in the process of adopting and applying those conventions, we should also be creative in forming strategic partnership that can contribute in a holistic, manner, a more interconnected and accessible global education system. And programs and networks such as the South-South University Cooperation Network can be a good, support system or ecosystem or even stepping stone to lead people to the convention well during the stage or the process of this partnership can truly unlock the potential of what partnership actually means and create those scattered programs that can eventually streamline the process of the realization of a convention and really promoting mobility and ensuring, once again, the opportunities are more equitable to students across the world, especially in the Global South.
Thank you, Lily, and particularly that UNESCO, while working with that at country level and policy level in terms of how they align, countries align, sign the treaties and the work. Implementation depends on university associations and universities. And particularly when you highlighted about South-South cooperation, because the contextual reality in the South-South universities and institutions are almost similar in terms of development stage, resources that they have, and other constraints in driving the education and research. So I think that these are the areas to look into, and this through global degree and this concept, it can be taken forward. Mr. Ramu Damodaran, now I come back to you. We started with your thoughts, and you know that you have worked with United Nations Academic Impact for more than a decade as a founder, head of that. And credit structure have direct impact on affordability, quality, and mobility, which is a priority area of Sustainable Development Goal 4, priority indeed. So how do you see that? What would be your suggestion that how we can strengthen the credit transfer, particularly from the view of academic impact or interinstitutional collaboration, based on your experience?
Thank you, Shivji. I must confess that in many senses, I'm a bit of an interloper into this wonderful conversation because I don't have the level of granular detail or first-hand experience that all of the other panelists and you yourself, Shivji, have. But I was very moved by this discussion because traditionally we've looked at a degree as recognizing, if I may, two elements. One is the need for employability. The degree gives you access to the job market. It's something which a potential employer can quantify in deciding whether or not you're hireable. And the other is essentially knowledge-based, where we try as an individual to enhance our scope of awareness, of knowing what's going on and knowing it in depth. Now, that knowledge element has to a large extent been overtaken by factors like communication, like AI, which we've discussed here, and may not really require that formal degree to recognize it. But the point that you just made, Shivji, about the academic impact, I think adds a third element to the purpose of higher education, and that is using it as the only sustainable, valid basis for coming to terms with issues with which our world is confronted and trying to resolve them. Just before you invited me to speak, we heard Dr. Lily Boson, and this idea of South-South cooperation, for instance, picture it a cooperation between the University of West Indies, which comprises all the small island states in the South Atlantic and South Pacific, and the South Pacific Forum, the University of the South Pacific, which has all the small island development states in that part of the world. This entire conglomerate, if you will, of small island developing states coming to terms with problems they have in common, even though they're completely apart in geography. Much as this is also true of the Association of African Universities, I dare say, where the experience of a particular country in, say, West Africa is radically different from that in North Africa. And yet, when you come down to it, the actual problems that they're trying to resolve are common and are capable of academic solution. So I hope when we think of this idea of a codified universal degree and the fact that we can work towards a recognition that is both common and universal, we will bring that factor in. Because we are now really witnessing a point where education goes far beyond the fulfillment or the facilitation of individual ambition to the most potent force that a state, a group of states, or the international community can use to advance further. And this is across every spectrum of human development, every aspect of sustainable development. When you think of what has been happening in laboratories around the world, in research institutes around the world, you begin to realize that education is no longer esoteric or something that has to be acquired through deep cerebral thought. Yes, but it also has to be strengthened by firsthand experimental and experiential learning and practice. And if we're able to make that practice transferable through the universality of recognition and a degree, the world will only be better for it.
Thank you very much, and for these insights, and particularly integrating experiential learning and vocational component, and how these initiatives can be initiated in context of Global South, where the contexts are similar. With this, we come to almost end of this. So I don't think that we have any time for question now, because we are going to close in 2 minutes. Once again, a big thank you all for joining us and for initiating this dialogue, taking it forward, and definitely we assure that the report we will prepare and we will be sharing with you all, and also to submit it to the UN, that what are the outcomes of this discussion. And we will not only stop at that point, to you also individually and also to others, we will be reaching out with this report, that what we can do, what are the few small but meaningful, impactful steps can be taken in order to develop the global degree.
See, we need to remember that change always should start from education. If it doesn't start from us, from whom?
Yes, and that's the point. So we have that responsibility of implementing and initiating this. Thank you once again. Thank you, Mr. Damodaran. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Professor Kyriakos, Professor Obadina, and Professor Sunita. It was a wonderful discussion together, thanks to Confederation of Indian Private Universities and our promotion supporting partner, Blitz India Media, and very much looking forward to connecting soon. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very
Thank
much.
you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor.